All right, so today we're going to be talking about WebSockets. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. What are WebSockets? Well, it's you know to prime it, they're just used in modern web applications, and the utility of them is that they initiate like long duration sessions over HTTP, and it's like asynchronous communication in both directions. So this low resolution image gives you a little bit of insight, but basically, the connections are initiated using HTTP, but they're not transactional in nature, so that connection will stay open and idle until the client or server is ready for some message to be sent. This is most useful for things like a chat application, like a shout box on a forum, or some kind of marketplace or trading forum where you need those updates. To be basically like you'd want a price to update in real time, or you'd want your trade to be processed in real time, stuff like that. This JavaScript right here is how you might use, in the client side, this might be how you establish a WebSocket connection. So you can see that WSS is the protocol being used, not to be confused with WSS like HTTP. The extra S stands for secure, meaning it's using the encrypted TLS connection. And sometimes you'll see WS, sometimes you'll see WSS. It's always advised to use the secure, quote unquote version of it so that you're getting that extra benefit of the encrypted connection. But let's just talk about the meat and potatoes of this, or kind of one of the biggest features, which is WebSocket messages. This is how you'll see it most of the time. So the front end will do something like this, where it'll, the JavaScript will use this to send some kind of message. And then that content might be, this is kind of like JSON format-ish content, right? Where you've got user and the content of the message being, this could be received or this could be what you're sending. And Burp Suite allows you to do all these things in the form of intercepting and modifying those messages, replaying them, generating them, and even messing around with your connection when the actual, the initial WebSocket handshake comes in. And on the topic of the handshake, right? There's some kind of exploits you can do with handshakes. It really depends on the context, but sometimes you'll see that there's, they only want certain, requests or certain users to be able to establish a connection by handshaking. So sometimes you could misuse the X forwarded for header to pretend like you're supposed to have it, or, maybe they use flawed session handling and you can just add some kind of HTTP header or add some cookie. Or manipulate your session cookie to make it appear as though you should be able to establish that handshake and establish that WebSocket connection. So just a few more things to look out for. But the real big thing for this module, in my opinion, is cross-site WebSocket hijacking, which is basically, if you're able to, how do I describe it? So if the WebSocket handshake relies solely on HTTP cookies for like session handling and does not use CSRF tokens or other defenses, we can make a, just like in cross-site request forgery, a malicious web page that establishes a WebSocket connection on the behalf of the victim. And unlike, CSRF, we'll actually get a two-way kind of interaction with the vulnerable application. So we won't need to, redo every single interaction because we've already done the handshake. So this picture I found online. It's a really solid demonstration, right? You lure them to your website, you get their session cookie, and you're able to use that to perform a proper WebSocket handshake and then perform some action on their behalf. If it's a chat application, send a message pretending to be them. Maybe you want your buddy to get spammed, so you decide to, I don't know, if it's like some forum with, I don't know, good boy points or something, you could say, hey, DM me for, for 2 credits or something, and then your friend will get flooded with DMs. It's a stupid example, but it's an example nonetheless. The impact of this, though, is basically anything you can do with cross-site request forgery. You can do, anything that the WebSockets, protocol is configured to do for that application. You can forge any of those things so long as the those protections aren't in place. And it's the same kind of cross-site request forgery protections. So you might see this a little more often than typical cross-site request forgery, albeit WebSockets aren't super common, but they're around. But the big thing is that, if a developer's using WebSockets, they're probably not sitting there thinking about cross-site request forgery, right? Because they're like, oh, this is WebSockets, this is different, but it's not. And so that's something you can take advantage of, depending on the context, of course. And, you know, the exploitation for that is about standard, but as far as prevention goes, make sure you're using the TLS version. It's extra security for basically no overhead, or I mean, not no overhead, but not a lot of extra effort on your part. Make sure you're also hard coding that WebSockets URL so that you can't somehow, so somebody can't, overwrite into that WebSocket URL and potentially get people to send stuff to the wrong domain. Make sure you're using cross-site request forgery protections, and make sure that that WebSocket data is, treated as any kind of user data, and sanitize it. Like there's no, nobody's going to get mad if you over sanitize your data, except for maybe the developers. But hey, we're trying to make secure stuff. We're not, trying to make the developers as happy as they could be. So that's all we've got for this one. Again, super short topic, super sweet and to the point. You'll find some CTFs that have to do with this, but there's not a crazy amount. But you might find one in the future. So that's all we got for today. I'll see ya.